I'm Linda Lorelle, creator and host of Our Voices Matter. Why this podcast and why now? Because it's time for us all to take a deep breath and listen. I am a journalist, business owner, keynote speaker, founder of an education nonprofit, wife, mother, daughter, sister, dancer, and lover of life and my country. And like so many of you, I am deeply distressed at the deteriorating level of discourse in our democracy. This podcast is my humble attempt to do something about it, one story at a time. It is my hope that as you listen to and watch the stories of someone you might consider to be the other, that you will somehow see a glimpse of yourself and be reminded of our common humanity. So what do you say? Let's take this journey together. Welcome to Our Voices Matter, a podcast dedicated to empowering us all to better understand each other. Our goal, to replace fear with knowledge, disdain with respect, and hate with love, one story at a time. So let's get to it.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today, and a big thanks to you, Mustafa Tameez, for taking time to talk to us about so many different things that are going on in the country. And full disclosure, Mustafa and I do business together through your firm, Outreach Strategists. Why don't you start by telling our listeners and our viewers a little bit about what you do?
I'm a recovering campaign consultant. Did a lot of political work. We used to work for Mayor White. I was his campaign manager and political director for many years when he was mayor. Now our firm does a lot of public affairs and media relations work. So we represent companies like Uber, but we do a lot of public engagement and community-oriented work.
Okay. So now I want to turn a little bit more to the personal side of Mustafa. So as you know, the reason that I'm doing this podcast is because I'm trying to foster conversations where people can, in effect, at some point, try to put themselves in someone else's shoes to understand what that perspective is like, because we are so far apart at this point. I'd like for you to share, you're a Muslim man living in America, to share a little bit about your background, where you were born, etc., how you got here, and what it's like for you to be living in this environment today.
Well, my family moved to Queens, New York in 1978, and I was 8 years old. So I grew up in Queens, New York, and one of my early memories is that when we moved and I started the fourth grade, I didn't speak English.
Your family moved from?
Karachi, Pakistan.
Pakistan, okay.
So when we moved here, enrolled in fourth grade, I didn't speak English. So I have memories of being in school. And all the kids are so much bigger than you are, and you didn't know what they were saying. And that feeling of not understanding and feeling just frightened probably were, for the first 6 months of school, were like that. And so I always have a soft spot for people that struggle with language, because when you don't understand, or if someone has a hearing impairment, or someone can't see, they're living in a very different reality than the rest of us. And so, as you're talking about walking in somebody else's shoes, it's always been easy for me to walk in somebody else's shoes that is somewhat misfit in a particular environment. So, growing up in Queens, it was 5 of us. We grew up in a 1-bedroom apartment, and we lived there for 5 years. Slept on a floor for the better part of those early years of my life. And I was talking to somebody the other day. I was telling them I didn't have a room of myself till I was a sophomore in high school. Mm-hmm. I actually didn't have a bed for myself till I was a sophomore in high school. We grew up in a working class family, worked hard.
What did your parents do?
My father worked for the New York City Police Department. He retired as part of the NYPD. He was part of the civilian staff there. And then he also had a job at night. So, he worked at a store that was inside of a hotel. So he worked very hard. He worked 18 hours a day for the better part of my life. I've always seen him have two jobs. Like he would go in the morning, very early morning, come back very late at night. Didn't have a lot of time in the middle. But it was through hard work that we got to the United States, and it was through his hard work that, I'm sitting here today with you. And so there's a lot of grace in that.
Why did your family decide to move from Pakistan to the United States?
Like many families that come to the United States, you come seeking opportunity. And my father came seeking opportunity for his kids. He actually was fairly comfortable in Pakistan. We had an upper middle income life. He was a kind of middle management. We had a nice home that we had built. So he didn't really need to come for himself. When he came to the United States, he was really coming for his kids. And he knew that the opportunity for myself and my brother and sister, the three kids he had, would be greater in this country than it was back where we were. And his sister lived here, and she, through the immigration process, I filed for immigration for him, and it took many years to get that immigration. And when it came, we sold our house and sold pretty much everything we had. And in his, mid-40s, moved from Karachi, Pakistan to the United States. And I remember when he first moved here, you sell everything you have, you convert your rupees into dollars, which doesn't amount as much. And so you come in thinking that this is the land of milk and honey and you'll find employment and things will be great. But it was hard. This is in the 1978, late 70s United States. The economy wasn't going all that well. It was hard for him to find a job. And one of the first jobs he ended up finding was in Nathan's Hot Dogs. And here's somebody who, comes from a generation where we were fairly comfortable, always had worked in a office environment, upper middle management, and for him to do, hard labor type of work. And so I remember him coming home one day, talking to my mom about this, that, there was a 16-year-old teaching him how to stuff a garbage bag. And he didn't know whether he should laugh or cry because he was like, this 16-year-old was my boss and he was telling me how to fill a garbage bag, right?
Wow.
And that was his, that was one of his first jobs. And for him, this was a difficult thing. So someone in their 40s to go back to working for a 16-year-old, stuffing garbage and mopping floors, when he just had never done that.
But he did it for his family.
He did it, and it was a true sacrifice. It was a sacrifice on his part and my mother's part to come to a place, to learn new language, to start all over again, to give a better future to their kids. And so for me, part of being here is not just doing well, but contributing. Finding a way that opportunity that my father created for me and my children, that opportunity is for everyone. And that just doesn't mean just for immigrants. It just means for everybody around you. Because if I'm not able to deliver on that, then my father's sacrifice really didn't mean a lot. Because we were doing okay where we were. It's not that we came, that we were poor or we didn't have enough means. We came, we had a fairly comfortable life where we were. So for me, giving back and being involved in the community and being involved in the civic capacity, making the city, the state, this country better, is a driving force.
As you pay attention to the dialogue that's going on, if you can call it dialogue, in our nation right now, as it relates to immigration, as it relates to religion, as it relates to everything. But you have a unique perspective on those two issues especially. So I want you to talk a little bit about what the misconceptions are about Muslims and what, if any, personal experiences can you share with us to help people understand what your perspective is and why those who might be watching you or looking at you or any Muslim person and have a sense of fear because they don't necessarily know or understand. What would you say to enlighten us all?
Well, look, I mean, I think it's not all that of a unique perspective. I think that we are a nation of immigrants that was founded on religious freedom. At the heart of the American experiment is that a group of people can come together from around the world and be Americans. We're not indigenous people. All of us, at one point, in some part of our heritage, has come here, unless you're a Native American. So we're a nation of immigrants, and then we were founded for the specific purpose of religious freedom. So this is, if you ask me, where do you want to be? Where do you fit in the world? It's here. I don't have that sense anywhere else. And a kid growing up in Queens, Houston has become home to me. And so, if out of all the places where I could go and live, and to be honest with you, we're blessed in the sense that we do have opportunities. We can go live in lots of other places. This is the place where I choose to be because this is my home. The best way for me to explain how Muslim Americans feel, during the last election cycle, I was taking my son to school, who at that time was in fourth grade. We're driving and there was this conversation of Muslim ban that was taking place. And my youngest son said, I'm glad Grandpa's dead. And so you're driving your car, you're like, I'm glad Grandpa's dead. And it just jarred me a little bit. I said, why do you say that? Reluctantly, because I didn't know where that's coming from, right? Where's this coming from, right? Wow. And he was like, well, because, he had a beard. I don't think they would let him be in the country. And I don't know where he would go if he couldn't be at home with us. So, he's in fourth grade. So, nice. So think about, like, at a young age, a young boy, being grateful that Grandpa's not alive because he didn't know what would happen to Grandpa. Just because he had a beard, that he might not be able to live in this country. So those are the kind of difficult conversations that.
What did you say to him?
I'll have to be honest with you. I write talking points for people for a living, and I was speechless. I didn't know how to engage in that conversation, and I think that's not uncommon. I think that this last election cycle. Not just the Muslim community, but all whether you're a woman, whether you're Hispanic, whether you're a Muslim American, really there's a whole stratus of many of us that have a hard time talking to our kids. There have been times where you walk in and the news is playing and you put it on mute because you're afraid what your kids might hear. And I don't think in my adult life, I don't remember a time where any of us felt that way, that we had to mute the television while the news hour was happening because we were afraid what our kids might hear. And that's and that's not an uncommon experience for a lot of Americans now. It's no longer just, hey, this is about the Muslim community. Well, it's no longer just about the Muslim community. It's no longer just about the Hispanic community. It's no longer just about women. It seems to be that list of the other continues to grow. And so we have to come together as Americans and start stitching back the fabric of this nation, because it's being teared and it's being pulled. It's not just happening in this country as a nation. Around the world, we're seeing this, that the extremes are not just ruling the airwaves with vile rhetoric, but now that vile rhetoric is taking political force and is starting to implement policy that not just divide us, but actually put us in danger.
I should also let our audience know, you probably have figured out, many of you, if you watch cable news regularly, that you see Mustafa many times on Fox News, on CNBC, on CNN, etc. as a pundit, if you will. I never really considered
a title I really aspired for most of my life.
But you are often called upon to weigh in on some of the issues that we're discussing right now. What kind of changes? I mean, you've been doing that part of your work for the last couple of years. You've been very, very visible. Just in the last year or so, have you seen a change at all in terms of I guess just the level of vitriol? What are you hearing and seeing and talking about among the folks who are in cable news on the inside? Can you give us a little bit of that insight?
Look, I think that if you look at, or those of us, those who are listening or watching this, if you look at your calendar, we all have become very busy. And the fight to get our attention has become fundamentally the most important thing from an advertising standpoint. So as the traditional way of life, which was, you went to work at 9, you got up, you were done at 5 o'clock, you came home by 6, you had dinner by 7, you watched a little bit of television and you went to bed. That's no longer the case. Those days are gone, right? The amount of productivity that we are squeezing out of ourselves is at all-time high. We're incredibly productive with what we do. So from an advertising standpoint, if you're marketing something, that you have to get our attention. And so those platforms have become a way to do that. So you're seeing a lot of clickbait stuff. So newspapers are struggling to sell advertising, and so they're going more towards a clickbait environment. Cable news is going to an environment where something that has to be really almost like a car crash for you to see, to get your attention to see. And so while that's happening on the one end, where the advertising need to get our attention is heightened and required for business models, on the other side, what you're really seeing is this connectivity we have with social media. iPhone was invented in 2007. iPad was in 2010. So it's not that long ago. Social media really took off after that part, because now you have a phone and you're connected to people all the time. So something happens around the world, you know immediately. And you know it not from Walter Cronkite or Linda Lorelle, right? You hear it from people that think like you.
Right.
So it's framed in a way that's already prepackaged in how you already think. So if you believe in something, as soon as you see that, you believe it more. So our hearts are hardening, our opinions are getting stronger, and our emotions are, just more raw.
Well, because the information that we're getting is reinforcing what we already think and believe in real time. In real time,
right? So if you kind of put those two things together from an advertising standpoint, you need to get people's attention. On the other side, we're interconnected. So anything that happens, we get the real raw emotion to kind of pull our attention. So those two things are happening constantly. And any given night on cable television at prime time, Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN combined, the combined audience is around 5 million people. So in a country of 320 million people, that's not a lot, right? So where that's really moving is those clips are being tweeted, and their clips are being put on Facebook, and people are talking about it. And so it is really at the palm of our hands that we're having conversations with people that think and believe the way we do.
So I want to talk a little bit about the media's role in all of this. Obviously, I'm a journalist. I was a news anchor at the NBC station here in Houston for almost 17 years and a reporter for a couple years before that. And then you've got your experience in the media. So I want to know what your take is on how much would you say the media are responsible for the division that we have in the country? Because there are people who think that the media bear quite a lot of responsibility for that.
Yeah. Look, I think I have a contrarian viewpoint of this. I think that it's very often that we point the finger at Washington and say Washington's the problem, or the media, and the media is the problem. And in reality, those are mirrors and a reflection of us. You know, we elect people that are in Washington. So we elect, that is the function of who we put there. And in the media, it's what we watch is what people produce. If nobody watched it, nobody would produce it. So, you know, I always say like public opinion drives public policy, and public opinion is shaped by the media. And so sometimes people think, oh, so the media is like shaping public opinion. That's not true. It's what people see on the media is what shaped public opinion. And what people see is basically what's happening. So if the president says something vile, the media has to report it. Opinion journalism has increased, you know, significantly. So now you're seeing opinion journalism in a more significant way, just because also it's because you have so many outlets that the opinions have to be out there. Meaning that as human beings, we always do want to know what others think. Right? So this is the modern day version of that. At one point, it used to be just an op-ed that you wrote. And now it's that you can get up on television and say your viewpoint and somebody wants to hear the other side. So I don't think the media is to blame for this, because we don't want certainly somebody to be a police of that. I think it's segmented. So we are watching the things that, you know, we agree with. And then it's being served to us in a platform where not only that message is what we agree with, but people that we know, our friends, our colleagues, are commenting on it and telling us that they agree with it too. So it just hardens our positions. And that is something that we personally, individually have to take responsibility and say, I want to understand the other side. I want to walk in somebody else's shoes to see how they would feel about this. And until we're willing to do that ourselves, it becomes very easy to say it's Washington, it's Austin, it's the president, it's the media that's at fault. That's good.
And I agree with that to a point. I do think that it's going to take people at the grassroots level to really make a difference. Which is why I, decided to do this podcast and to talk to all kinds of people from all different walks of life. I do think that the media outlets need to really think, in a little bit of a different way in terms of how they're covering certain things. I know one of the raps that especially CNN got during the election, especially early in the election, is that they were playing Trump's rallies, beginning to end, nonstop, for multiple months, because they didn't believe he had a chance of winning. That was the reality. And then when it became, well, guess who won? Then all of a sudden, there was a switch. So I find that really interesting. And I know that media outlets are struggling with how to deal with social media, the immediacy of it, and with a business model that was created 40 or 50 years ago, and how to, connect those dots and yet still serve the people in the way that they need to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the news used to be a small component of the entire day's broadcast. It was half hour or an hour, right? Now there's channels that are devoted to that. Right. And in it, they have news and they have opinion journalism. And it's very hard people to distinguish between what's opinion versus what's actual news. And if you look at the ratings, like that CNN rating would be less than 1 million people watching. But it's how is that being clipped and pushed out on other distribution methods on social media and other places where the bulk of it is being watched. So I think that we have to kind of start putting that in context, right? Because in a way, it's a generational thing. If you ask baby boomers and Generation X, like my generation, who are new to social media, that this is not native to us. We've learned it, we use it, but it's not as intuitive because it's still new. We can't discern between what's opinion versus what's news, what's legitimate and real versus what's just hype, right? If you look at the generation after mine, they can actually tell what is credible and what is not, because this is a native environment for them. So they are far more discerning on what's on the internet and what they are reading and what is the source, versus if you look at the baby boomer generation and my generation, that sometimes we can be more manipulated because this is not a native environment for us. This is new. It's interesting. We can easily be manipulated because this is not our home turf. So I think those issues will resolve themselves. I think the advertising click models will resolve themselves. Right now, advertising, a lot of it is based on, how many clicks you get. And pretty soon advertisers will realize that although you're getting a click, they're not actually buying it. So why base a metric of a click for payment? Because that's not generating revenue. And so, but they haven't figured out what's a better way, right? So over time, those things will begin to resolve and content will win out. And so substantive things that actually have an authentic voice that speak to people. I mean, we're doing a podcast right now, and podcasts have become incredibly popular, and because people are able to discern and say, I want to listen to this. Right? Because this is something that, speaks to me in a particular way. And you're seeing more and more of that the overall media market and Netflix, not just stocks, but in viewership is going up because people are able to say, I want to watch what I want to watch when I want to watch it.
Exactly.
Right. So as consumers, we're starting to kind of be very selective. So that I think is very strong, and in it, the better content over time is going to win out, right? Rather than the clickbait. The hard part for me is that while that's happening and there's a lot of positive to it, things like Pandora, that if you like a particular type of music, then that music is served to you. That we're not getting to be in others' shoes. We're not getting to explore new things and different viewpoints.
Unless you seek it out. And that's the whole, crux of it, because you have to want to seek it out, in order to get the other person's point of view.
Yeah. It will have to be like I think that, as we move forward in the next several decades, not just this one, but next several decades, as you see a development of artificial intelligence, that people will have to actually take a decision to say, I want to hear the other viewpoint. Because the where we're headed, whether it's a simple example of Pandora or your Facebook feed, which gives you what you want to hear, right, based on your past selections, right? It narrows your choices for you.
And we become siloed.
You become siloed, right? So in essence, we have so many choices. Part of us wants, somebody to make some of these decisions and give us the things that we like. But over time, if we're going to reach our individual potential, we will have to make a conscious decision and say that I want to understand the other side. I want to walk in somebody else's shoes. I want to experience something that I've not experienced before. I want to try something that I know intuitively I might not like, but I want to try it anyway.
And it's okay. That's the whole point, is that it's okay. It's okay if we don't agree politically. I think, it gets down to, for me, human connection. And one of the downsides of technology is that it has led to people communicating by text and, sitting right next to each other and texting, and not actually taking time to look in someone's eyes and see how they are affected by whatever it is you might be saying. And so in order for us to have that connection, I think, again, that's why I wanted to do this show, because I think it's important for people to be able to see a Muslim American man who was born in Pakistan and who came, whose family gave up so much to be here and to understand what your perspective is. What words of encouragement do you have for us as we navigate these very tricky times?
Look, I think that there is a general feeling more than anything of this doom and gloom, right? We just see things around us and it just makes us cringe. And a lot of it is not proportional to where we are in the world now. I mean, the world is more at peace today than ever in history. I mean, 25 years ago, we were in the Vietnam War. 50,000 Americans were killed, came in body bags. 25 years before that, we were in World War II, and 25 years before that, we were in World War I. Mm-hmm. Very, human carnage is just incredible when you think about that. So the world is actually more at peace today in the last, 15, 20 years than any time in history. We're more prosperous today as a world than any time in human history. I mean, you can credibly say that in the next, 15, 20 years, we might eradicate hunger in the world. I mean, we're actually at a point where there is enough food. It's just a matter of how do we get it to people?
Right.
How do we fix our distribution mechanism? So we're not only more at peace today, but we're more prosperous today. China alone took 10 million people out of poverty in the last decade. So we're at more peace. We're at more prosperous than ever before. And, you look at climate change and you go this climate change is, people have to come accept that this is human made. The upside to it is that if it's man-made, then we can actually do something about it. We can both take personal action in our personal life. We can take communal action in government policies and global policies. But there's also innovation that can come in and take place on fixing some of these things, whether it's the ozone layer or anything else. So the way I look at it, that the glass is more than half full, that we actually live in a better time than any time in human history. And the opportunity for the world is phenomenal. But it requires, just like my dad, some level of sacrifice. It requires effort. It requires to walk in somebody else's shoes. It will not happen if we lean back and say it will fix itself, or that somebody else would fix it for us. So this is a time where people have to be more engaged. And if you look at the election and what's going on now, in our state, we've had as many people vote by end of yesterday as the entire midterm election in 2014. That's just phenomenal.
Really
right?
Yeah.
So when people are pushed and when it becomes important, as Americans, as Texans, as Houstonians, we respond. Whether it's to a hurricane or it's to a corrupt and brazen type of politics, we do respond. Sometimes not as quickly as we should. Sometimes we dawdle a little bit, but that's just part of being a human being, right? We're not necessarily rational beings. We're an irrational being. But we are coming together. And so I'm very optimistic that this is the time to be alive, and this is the time to be in a place like Houston, the most diverse city in the nation. And this is the time where the opportunities for our kids and our grandkids are incredible. We just have to make the sacrifices and work towards them.
We do. And as the title of the show is, all of our voices matter. Yours, mine, everyone's out there. All voices matter, and we have to be able to raise them and speak up about what's important to us, but also to listen with respect. And I think that's the main thing.
And I'll just add one thing, and I think you've asked me a few times as a Muslim man. I think that that element of respect. I served on ADL's Coalition of Mutual Respect, which is different faith leaders coming together. And I find that faith is an important part of our nation's history, as well as our nation's future. And I don't mean that just in the Abrahamic faiths or any kind of organized faith, because some people are just spiritual and not necessarily adhere to any particular one religion. But that sense of belonging and taking care of your neighbor is intrinsic part of all of that faith. That is a common thread, the golden rule. Do unto others, do unto others as you would have done to you. So no matter what scripture you look at, that is a consistent thing. And I would argue that is the one thing that gives us a sense of internal satisfaction and peace as human beings. That when we do something for someone without wanting something in return, that is the one thing that always gives us that sense of joy and peace. So we're wired that way. We are wired to be there for each other. So I think that sense for me is that the future is bright, because we might let ourselves down, but we're not going to let our neighbors down.
I love that thought. I really do. Thank you so much, Mustafa.
Thank you.
We've known each other for quite some time, but I learned a lot about you today because we've never had this kind of a conversation. So I really appreciate your perspective. Thanks so much for taking time, and thank you for watching and listening.
If the mission of Our Voices Matter resonates with you, please like, subscribe, download, and share. And then join the conversation, because it really is going to take all of us to make a difference.